it was because I was looking around at other companies that felt like they were doing something sort of adjacent to what we were doing at Clue. And I was trying to see how do they describe what they're doing, because I knew how difficult it was for me. Mm-hmm. And I could see that the language was kind of all over the place. And I wanted ourselves, and I wanted investors and media, like the world, to understand that no, we are all part of this big thing that's happening in tech. Mm-hmm. I could feel that there's something happening, and it is related. But when you looked at how we describe it, nobody would guess that it was related. So that was one thing. But it was also this sense of discovery and kind of banding together to have strength, because we were doing things and are doing things that felt very stigmatized, and in a very male-dominated world can be challenging also for the men to talk about some of these things. So I thought, what if they and we had a term that would make it really easy to talk about? Like we talk about FinTech, we could talk about FemTech. And I think that did several things. It helped people find each other. It helped people do calculations on a segment in tech. That was really valuable, instead of like what were perceived as a bunch of niche, weird little companies doing like geeky things. It could be perceived as something reflecting this big cultural shift that was happening and is happening.
Welcome to AI Geeks, for the love of AI. AIGeeks.com.
What is up, everybody? Today, I'm having a phenomenal conversation with a phenomenal guest, Ida Tin. Ida is the mother of a thriving industry called the FemTech industry, the industry that is designed and focusing specifically to monitor women's health, which is today, according to analysts, is worth over $28 billion. Not bad. She is, of course, the co-founder of the award-winning app Clue, which has been around since 2013. But also, one of the things that she has done, which I think is quite phenomenal, although not for the right reasons, that is, she is one of the 2% of female tech entrepreneurs that managed to raise massive VC funds, in her case, over $70 million. And I think it's, of course, as you know, my view on this, I think it's pretty despicable that the VCs seem to be ignoring women, because there's no other way of putting it. If only 2% of tech startups that successfully manage to get any cash from VCs are run by women, despite the fact the tech sector has got a hell of a lot more than 2% of female entrepreneurs and tech CEOs, yet only 2% get any cash from VCs. Well, Ida Tin is one of those, but after that, she stepped down from her own company. And we are discussing all of these issues in this conversation. And she, like me, basically feels that things need to change. In fact, I feel sometimes that perhaps we failed in achieving our mission back in the day of making the world a better place with technology, because surely today, what we're seeing is that the tech sector is moving in a pretty precarious direction. And Ida and I are having a very deep conversation about that. And I would love you to be part of this conversation. Tell us what you think. Do we simply sound like the old farts that are talking about the good old days, which I can assure you we're not? Or are we onto something? I personally believe that we are, because I am still at the heart of the tech sector through the AI side of things. Now, I'm going to come to that in a separate episode, because I'm really, really excited for you to listen to this conversation and hear Ida's story and her views. She is a really, really talented entrepreneur. I really hope that she is going to start something pretty amazing. I think she will. I mean, you guys listen to what she says and you tell me, do you think she's going to do something amazing? I think she will. As always, guys, you know what to do. Support the growth of this channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing. And of course, if you have any cash to spare, you're very welcome to become a member by going to aigeeks.com/join. Or you can also check out all of the sponsorship links in the description below. So, my friends, Ida Tin. Hey, Ida. Thank you so much for joining us in AI Geeks today. How are you?
I'm good. So excited to be here.
Well, we had a short conversation before we started recording about, ethical AI and digital ethics, etc. But generally, every time I speak to a fellow entrepreneur, the first question I always ask is about your journey. It's like, how did your whole entrepreneurship journey start? I know in your case, I think you've been pretty much involved in the world of business your entire life, right? So how did your journey start that led you towards Clue?
But it's funny you say that I've been involved with business my whole life, because I somehow think that I've managed to be an entrepreneur without maybe putting enough attention on the business side. I think I've just always been really driven by doing things that I cared about very deeply and that felt meaningful. And my entrepreneurial journey started as a complete random coincidence, because I literally got lost in the hallways of a university in London. I was going
Join the club, I guess.
I don't know why, but I ended up in an entrepreneur course for people who were doing creative businesses. And I showed up the first day and they asked, "What's your business idea?" And I was like, and I just said something completely improvised. I was like, "Crystal bead jewelry." I have no idea. And so that was my first company. I built a crystal bead jewelry company. And after about 6 months in the fashion world, I knew that entrepreneurship was fun. Fashion industry, not so much. And I took all the money I'd earned and I went to Mexico and bought a motorcycle and traveled there for 6 months and did that with the money. I, at some point, had this question in my mind of why has nobody innovated in family planning methods? Because it seemed like a really central problem to solve for human mankind, helping people control how many babies are born on this planet and when and by whom, they should want to have their babies. And also myself, I've had boyfriends since I was 16, and, it was just this continuous question of how to not get pregnant. And then I thought, well, the iPhone, the first iPhone had just come out. This was 2008. And I thought this is a really neat interface for really intimate data, because I wanted basically my phone to tell me, can I get pregnant today? Yes or no? And this was also the time of quantified self. And I thought, if we just collect enough data around where you are in your cycle, you would know which very few days per cycle you can actually get pregnant. And the rest of the time you could not worry. And the days you could get pregnant, you could use a condom. And I thought, the big diagnostic companies, they must be working on this, because this is such a brilliant idea. I wanted to measure hormones in saliva, because I thought that's a really easy user interface. It's non-invasive. You can do it really fast. So that was my beginning of wanting to do something in female health. And then I should say I had a motorcycle touring company in between for 5 years with my dad. So that was also an entrepreneurial journey, literally. The motorcycle industry was also fun, but after 5 years, I wanted to start a family. It wasn't really compatible, and many other things. Anyway, I ended up in female health and started building this hardware. And then over the years, realized that I could probably get to the same result by only looking at data without the hardware. In bracket, had also failed in building the hardware, so that was very convenient.
It's always hard with hardware, yeah.
Yeah, hardware is hard, and especially because for the investors, we were this sort of two-headed monster, where they're like, "Are you going to speak to our life science folks, or are you consumer tech?" Like, there were no bridges. Of course, now I think it's a no-brainer that whenever you build hardware, you're really also building software, and most likely connect to something, digital. So, but that was a little bit before that had sort of become a thing. So at some point we're like, this is too complicated. We need to make it simpler. And then focused on the consumer tech part, building a period tracking app, because we thought that's a great way to start getting, into this field and understanding data and understanding this particular data set. And then over the years, when we understood that's wow, we were like, whoa, this is a really powerful data set. We can do so many things with it. And one of the things we eventually managed was to get FDA clearance to be 100% digital, data-driven type of birth control, the first in the world. It's not currently in the market. That's a whole story. It has a lot to do with investors. But, it could be done. It took me 10 years, but eventually we got it. So that's a little bit about my journey.
So yeah, it's a 10-year journey, but I guess in the world of entrepreneurship, 10 years doesn't seem that long, does it? It kind of just flies by. You kind of look back at it and you're thinking, wow, it's been 10 years, but it just doesn't feel like it. I mean, do you feel like that sometimes? Like,
I think I'm very humble to the fact that once you really let an idea kind of rule your life. You should be ready for it long, right? Like things do take time and it becomes so immersive. In some ways it feels fast, but in some ways it also feels like it was like a whole chapter of my life that also came to, if not an end, at least a transition.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it does feel like something of the past that was a big chunk. If that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, as I mentioned to you earlier, that I left the whole sort of VC funded or investor funded tech world in 2022, and even though my overall journey with investors like that, it lasted 15 years, so it feels like crazy long time. But it didn't feel like that. But interestingly, like I said, like it's the transition. In my case, it was more like I felt that I don't know why, but I'll be very honest. It's like I feel like I've been liberated. I don't know why. It's like sort of you exit that chapter of your life and you think, okay, I've done it all in that area. I've done what I wanted to do. There are successes, failures, etc. But now I'm ready to do something different.
Yeah.
And even though I'm in my late 40s, but it just doesn't feel like that. It's like, well, yeah, I'm happy to do something different. And I'm thinking, is that what it takes to be because I'm like you, I never see myself as like sort of entrepreneur. People kind of talk, oh, you're the entrepreneur. I see, actually, I'm a scientist. that's my main background. And the whole entrepreneurship thing was kind of, is an accident. My whole AI journey was an accident. It's just more like I see a problem and I'm like, you know what? I want to try and solve that problem. Not because it's fun. I feel it's maybe I'm mission driven, kind of like what you said, that you feel like there's a mission that was just brewing inside you that made you feel, somebody needs to do this. I mean, like there's not enough focus in supporting sort of female health. And actually you coined the famous term FemTech, right? So how did that come about? Was that something, was that a PR plan or was it an accident as well?
No, I have to give credit to my co-founder, Hans Raffau, for being the marketeer. And I think that was actually very important for it to matter in the world the way it has mattered, and I think matters. No, it was because I was looking around at other companies that felt like they were doing something sort of adjacent to what we were doing at Clue. And I was trying to see how do they describe what they're doing, because I knew how difficult it was for me. And I could see that the language was kind of all over the place. And I wanted ourselves and I wanted investors and media, like the world, to understand that, no, we are all part of this big thing that's happening in tech. I could feel that there's something happening and it is related. But when you looked at how we describe it, nobody would guess that it was related, So that was one thing. But it was also this sense of discovery and kind of banding together to have strength, because we were doing things and are doing things that felt very stigmatized, and in a very male-dominated world can be challenging also for the men to talk about some of these things. So I thought, what if they and we had a term that would make it really easy to talk about? Like we talk about FinTech, we could talk about FemTech. And I think that did several things. It helped people find each other. It helped people do calculations on a segment in tech. That was really valuable, instead of like what were perceived as a bunch of niche, weird little companies doing like geeky things. It could be perceived as something reflecting this big cultural shift that was happening and is happening.
Yeah.
So that was my thinking. But I didn't know that it would really come to become a thing. I mean, I think I've now been very fortunate that I've got to travel and meet FemTech entrepreneurs in Africa, in the Middle East, in Australia, in Japan, many places. And people literally say that one word changed my world and my life, because suddenly they could orient themselves towards something that felt really aligned with their own, missions in life.
Yeah.
I think that's incredible that a word can have such kind of crystallizing power in a way.
Yeah. And well, interestingly, because you mentioned FinTech. I mean, because I was in London during that period when FinTech was emerging in London post the financial crash. And it was amazing, like how that one word did literally change the entire attitude of the financial sector on how to use AI, or not just AI, but digital tech in general. Because up to that point, it was very draconian. And I think, and I fully agree with you as well, because like, FemTech is a thing. It's not. It kind of went beyond your name, right? Like your association. It's really now a genuine sector, isn't it? It's a FemTech sector. It's not. It's not a Clue thing or an Eda thing.
No.
It's a genuine sector now that basically you guys created.
I think sometimes, something is ready to emerge in culture. It's like part of the zeitgeist. Like if we hadn't made up that word, probably somebody else would have made up that word or something similar. It's only a thing because it's happening in the world. I don't know how much a word can drive behavior in the world. Maybe a little bit, but probably it's just an expression, something that makes something visible that is really happening or needs to happen.
Yeah.
But it's fun to see. It's fun to see, I met 2 women who have started FemTech China. They're literally like the first 2 people in China who's like, we're going to make female health and technology come together in China. And I'm like, this is so exciting. Like, oh my God, you're going to, create wonderful things. I think.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
And the interesting thing is, because you mentioned when the iPhone was released the first time, Apple actually had the opportunity to do that with Apple Health. Was it you that called them out? Because when they released the Apple Health app, like the first version of it, I can't remember how many years ago that was, and it was pretty embarrassing because they forgot a tiny little thing included.
You would measure potassium and how many, almost how many times a day you'd blink, like anything you could think of.
Yeah.
The periods.
But was it you who called them out?
I actually don't fully remember. I don't think it was. I think somebody called them out and then they contacted us and be like, what should we include? And we helped them brainstorm a little bit on the first version of security tracking app. Yeah. I have a lot to say about that app, but maybe I won't. But
No, that's fair. But because it just makes you wonder. I mean, how could a company like Apple, with all the resources and the talents that they have, miss something that is pretty obvious? I mean, obviously, mostly it's to do with the fact that most developers that they had at the time were just men and they're just clueless. I mean, my daughter told me actually recently. She's only 13, but she's very much into the FemTech. She inherited my genes in being obsessed with gaming and tech and stuff like that. And she said something that she read somewhere that this I can't remember, it was a female astronaut that she was supposed to go to space for 6 weeks, and all of the people in NASA that were trying to help her, like pack the things that that she needed, they apparently said they gave her 100 tampons for 6 weeks. It's like, they asked her, do you think that's enough? And she was like, nah, can I have some more, please? It was just out of fun. But it was like, but I'm just wondering, is that the problem? Is it because it's predominantly a male-dominated industry?
It is. I think it is that simple, actually. And it's just a brilliant example of how many blind spots you're going to have if you don't have diversity in your thinking, in your teams. And, I think it's all over the world. Everywhere we look, there is an odd kind of invisibility around women's lives, especially their reproductive lives, where a lot of the things that every single woman will experience and have many stories to tell about somehow is just not part of our general awareness or cultural awareness or main culture or pop culture. It's just, there's this vacuum where it's like, oh, it's gone. It's really peculiar. And I don't think it's the men's fault as such, because I think we care about the things we experience.
Yeah.
I think it's on men to be curious and open to hear the stories, but it's definitely also on the women to tell them and to be kind of owning them, being well enough in our own bodies that we can share these stories. And I think that's the whole kind of cultural space problem that we are living in, where some things are just simply not visible in culture. And it's really interesting. And I've been thinking about that. It seems like innovation happens in this part of culture that is just becoming visible. When suddenly there is a global awareness about something, is like, why don't we something? And then technology comes in and be like, oh, we can help with this. But there first have to be this opening where somebody's like, actually, I would like to have this problem solved for me. The way that I had this thing of like, why has technology not solved the problem of not getting pregnant? Well, there had been no innovation since the pill came out in the 50s. Like, we've put people on the moon since then. And the women to this day still don't know which day she can become pregnant. Why is nobody caring about that? I want that, And I think it's so wonderful to see how many entrepreneurs who then say, well, I'll build it then, like you have done with your AI. Like, why is, misinformation not being taken care of? I can do something with technology. And I think many women feel that. And I think that's why we have so many female entrepreneurs in FemTech where they're like, no, like we need to do this better. They know how much suffering and pain and frustration and trouble is coming out of people not having adequate solutions. So I think you said another great line before we started recording, which is like, technology can do good. It's a choice. And for me, I have this big question of, why are we innovating the places we are, and why are we not innovating in other places? Who gets to decide what are the big questions to try and answer with technology? And out of that, at the other end of the journey, like, what do we call success? Right now we only measure success in money and profit, and it just creates a bunch of problems for the world. And for everybody, except maybe a very few people who get more rich, because they're usually already rich when they start getting richer. And it just creates a flat world. It's not, it's not healthy. It's not as rich and wonderful as it has potential to be. So this question of who gets to build technology, what's the democratic process in that? Who decides when something's successful? I think these are really important questions for the tech world to grapple with, because we are forming the world. And as you said, it takes actual action to care about ethics. It's an action. If you are totally passive and you just float along with like, we just need to make more money, that's not a very cool stance to take as somebody shaping the world. It's like, we need to do a little better, I think.
No, I agree. I mean, actually, because I do talks occasionally, like in sort of events and things like that. And one of the things I tell people, because you probably have seen the rise of people promoting entrepreneurship. And for me, the thing that I find fascinating, because every time they say, you want to become an entrepreneur in order to make money, it's like as if it's the only way to make money. But I always try to call this out, because I'm saying, well, actually, some of the richest people I met being in London, right? They're not entrepreneurs. You've got bankers, you've got lawyers, you've got landlords, right? And when I say landlords, I don't mean people that kind of started a property business, but rather people that inherited, their, great grandparents' mansion somewhere. They didn't even make that money to buy it, but they've got the wealth. So effectively, you don't really need to be an entrepreneur to build wealth. You can get a good job. I mean, if you're a successful person in any particular job. I know CEOs, for example, who are not entrepreneurs, but they worked in a corporation and they kind of worked up the ladder, as it were, and now they are multimillionaires. So it's not about entrepreneurs. So I tell people, look, actually, if you want to make money,
you can also be an entrepreneur without becoming a billionaire.
You can absolutely, absolutely. But I think, what I tell people, entrepreneurship is about impact. And I think that's why it's so hard. For me, successful entrepreneurship, it's about, have you actually managed to make a difference? And it doesn't really have to be on the global scale. Obviously, if it's a global scale, that's amazing. Like very few people can do that. But even locally, I'm a big believer that, if you live in the local community and there's a problem in your local community and you can solve that problem, you're an entrepreneur. Because it takes a lot of energy, time, effort, stress, sleepless nights, right? Courage, exactly. Facing the fire in many ways. That's what entrepreneurship is. And notice that I didn't say the word money at all. Money comes towards the end eventually, right? And sometimes not a lot. But being an entrepreneur, it's really about impact rather than just money. But obviously, you should make money because you have to pay the bills, obviously, right? So that's the sort of thing. But in terms of courage, because that's the point that that I really wanted to talk to you about, because you and I both know Cindy Gallup, and she was a guest here in the last episode, and she's a very active campaigner against the rise of things like rape culture, toxic masculinity, etc. And you made a point earlier, which I agree with, that something like FemTech kind of creates an aha moment across society, not just for women but men as well. Yet at the same time, because obviously in the world that I've been involved with of fighting misinformation, we have seen this pretty strange rise of toxic masculinity and sort of very anti-women rhetoric. It's like as if, oh my God, look, women are taking everything away from us poor men. Men are sidelined. We even have politicians here in the UK. They have the audacity sometimes to stand in parliament and say, oh, we're focusing too much on all this woke stuff. We're focusing on the welfare of women, welfare of transgender women, but we're ignoring all these poor men that have been left behind. And I thought to myself, dude, do you realize like 98%, for example, in the world of tech, 98% of startups that raise money are companies run by men? Women barely made it to 2%. What do you mean that they're left behind? They're not left behind. What the hell are you talking about? But there is that belief. It's kind of brewing. Yeah. And it's you got the rise of Andrew Tate and people like that. And he's not the cause. He's the symptom. But this is something that's been building up, from what I've seen, at least 10 years. And I'm just wondering, in your opinion, where is this coming from? Because I really don't understand it. I don't get it at all.
Okay, I have a very radical thought.
Go for it. Yeah, I like radical stuff.
Okay, so obviously humans are made up of many emotions, and we're complex, and we have, our story and probably our ancestors' story and all of that. But I think there is also think of it almost like a bass tone running through, and I think a lot of men are sad. And I think a lot of women are angry. Mm. I think it's both true that men are given money and given opportunity and are granted, the belief that they're great in many situations where women are not. And so all of that is true. And at the same time, I do think men are left behind in some ways, because I think there is this lack of opportunity for men to be full humans that have all emotions. It's a really there's a kind of a narrow idea about what it is to be a man. The same way there is kind of a narrow idea of what it is to be a great woman. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And both are frustrating and unhealthy and creates a lot of, pain and mess and noise. Mm-hmm. And when they try to meet, it definitely creates all kind of issues. And I think women will not be fully liberated till men are too. Mm. And so
from the patriarchy, basically, the patriarchy that created by men is actually impacting men as well, effectively.
Yes, I definitely think so. And I think that's also why, to change things, we can't just point fingers at men, because I have experienced so many men who want to be supportive and they're open and they're trying, and they feel, one, they don't have maybe awareness, but they're also working systems where it's difficult to change things. I think a lot of people feel that they are in this system where they are actually good people, but they can see the system is not doing good, and this inner conflict of how to do that. So I think we always have to build bridges to the other gender and be like, how can we bring people into our world and help them understand more? And how can we give them ideas on how to do things a little differently that would create more gender equality? Because I think men are as stuck in this problematic pattern that we have, in a way, as women. I'm not saying that they're not unproportionately more suffering on the women's side. I think there is in many ways, and especially globally. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's horrifying what's happening in many women's lives. But I just think the way to actually change that is to actually understand more about men's needs and sufferings as well. Because I think, this thing about how do you show up as a more full person where you don't have to be tough and know it all the time, all these cliches.
Yeah.
I think that's the way forward. And I also think that women need to put their foot down and express what they need, what they want, what they don't want, say no. I think a lot of women are supporting a lot of bullshit that comes from men. Where I'm like, why are you supporting this bullshit? Why are you laughing at those stupid jokes? Why are you servicing them? Why are you not taking the word? Why are you criticizing yourself too much? All that, it's on women. You need to stop it.
Yeah.
I know why they're doing it, because they're getting punished if they don't do it. So, but this change has to come from both sides, I think.
There's actually interesting research. I think it was we definitely. I think we published it in our journal. That was published. I think it was Lego that they ran this interesting research that really highlights why girls and women have this apparent lack of confidence. It's like, men, sort of quote unquote naturally have this capacity to say, well, look, I'm brave enough to do this, right? But women, not so much. And they actually take this all the way back to childhood and even how parents and the system talks to girls. So, for example, and I thought that was really fascinating, that, for instance, like when a boy, say, builds a Lego thingy, right? Everybody would say, oh, this is so amazing, this is so cool, etc. But when girls do it, the sort of language they get, oh, this is so cute, oh, it's so nice, oh, look at her, she actually did that herself. So it's quite condescending. It's not, I mean, people don't necessarily mean it in that way, but that difference in language, it pretty much rewires your brain in thinking that, a lot of women be thinking, oh, I don't want to be cute, I want to do this properly, but then people are not going to see it that way. That it kind of creates that situation that women feel that they're not strong enough to do something through no fault of their own. But it's like this societal, almost subliminal programming that's been taking place over many, many generations. And we don't even know it. But so I thought that research was really fascinating. I mean, is that something that you agree with as well?
Absolutely. And I remember I once said at this roundtable discussion, and the question was, how do we create more female entrepreneurs in Europe? And I thought about my own story. I grew up traveling the world on motorcycles with my parents and my older brother. I have very much not been brought up to be, in a way, a girl. I used power tools. I learned to ride a motorcycle when I was 11. I, traveled alone all over the way. Yes, so many things that people are like, oh, is that not dangerous? And blah, blah. And I have to give all credits to my parents. There was never any difference between me and my brother, I think. And I think especially dads have a huge role to play to bring up strong, confident daughters.
Yeah.
And mothers to bring up really gender-aware boys. But I was sitting there at this roundtable discussion, and I was thinking, God, if people need to have as unusual and weird an upbringing as I've had to become an entrepreneur, there is literally no hope. We'll never get the statistics right. So, I think it's just wonderful to see the strength that so many female entrepreneurs have. They come with all that baggage. It is really scary. And they get so much resistance, and they still do it. They still do it. And I'm super impressed. Super impressed. People from all walks of life who manage to do something that is just so not in their cards. They have my uttermost respect, really. That's very impressive. And we also know the data that people who have immigration backgrounds or who are in some way different, they just do so well as entrepreneurs. They really do. I don't understand why this basic data fact is not more sort of strong when people make their investment decisions.
Yeah.
If an underrepresented person comes through the door, they have already, beaten all odds. They must be amazing. You should really listen, I think.
No, absolutely. I mean, because that kind of brings me nicely to the VCs, because...
Let's go.
Because like I mentioned earlier that, basically from the world of tech, only 2% of VC-funded companies are run by women. And and I suppose congratulations to you. You are one of those 2%, right? Like you raised, was it over 30 million last year or a couple of years ago, something like
I
that?
think we've raised around 70 million. I also have
No,
a
it's around
male
70 million. Oh,
co-founder.
wow.
That's probably quite important.
Yeah. Yeah. So how, because again, because I've seen articles and some other, various interviews, it's more like they ask the female entrepreneur, well, you did it and it's so hard. I'm like, well, actually it's hard for everybody. Yet the way I see it, I mean, I'm an ethnic I am an ethnic minority. I'm a mixed race. So, I don't kind of belong into anything like whichever culture I go to that is related to my parents' culture. They're like, oh, you're not black enough to be African. Oh, you're not white enough to be Russian or Ukrainian. I'm like, whatever, fine. I'm good with that. So, so it is difficult for everybody. But if it's 2% only, to me, that's suppression. Right? If we're talking about like, 40% women, 60% men, yeah, minority, whatever. 2%, this is suppression. That's basically, there's no interest in female run companies, in my opinion. I mean, like when I see that kind of data, these sort of data points, that would be my interpretation. Because, if 50% of the population is women and only 2%, right, are being funded, and you and I know there are a hell of a lot more women in the world of tech than 2%. So it's totally not unrepresentative. So first, I suppose from your point of view, because I'm sure you would have faced resistance from VCs. So I really would love to sort of find out from your perspective as somebody that has faced that resistance, but you still managed to break through the barrier and raised 70 million.
So, well,
we're going there.
I met some really visionary male investors. I did. I met people who had consciously said, in this area of tech, we're going to invest into a woman. They have been pitched by men and they're like, no, we want a woman. So that was very important. I had a male co-founder. I think that was important because a lot of the deal making doesn't happen in the pitch room and it happens all kind of places where men hang out. That was important. I think we had a product that proved a lot of real need in the world. But I would love that every single VC firm showed their stats on their website. How many percentages of pitches were done by mixed teams, female-only teams? How many did they invest in out of these? Just like show me the data so that when I'm an entrepreneur, I can skip through all the bullshit that you write on your front page and I can see what you actually do. I want that. I want a rating system where entrepreneurs can break their VCs. Like we have everywhere. We have it at Airbnb and eBay and everywhere else. Why is there no accountability in the system?
Yeah.
They can rate me too. They can tell the whole world how I suck in many ways. And what I was good at too, maybe, And because I think one of the big problems in VCs is that we waste so much time. So I have many ideas. I wrote a whole series on LinkedIn with like 8 radical ideas for how to change venture capital because I think it's the biggest time suck ever. And it's really hard because you start doubting yourself, your idea, your clothes, your glasses, like everything, especially women, because you get so many no's and often you don't understand why. They'll be like, we love your product. We love your vision. Your team is amazing. Your matrix looks stunning. The great pitch. We're not going to invest. And you're like, what? What more will it take?
Yeah.
I often have that reaction when I hear female entrepreneurs and they tell me what they've achieved and they're like, we cannot raise the money. I'm like, what more will it take? They got it all and they still can't raise the money. So I think more data and more transparency and more accountability would help.
Yeah.
And I also think we could have a little more like the first layer of filtering actually be maybe anonymized so people don't know which gender is building. I don't know if these are good ideas, but let's try asking ourselves questions and come up with ideas. Let's try some things. Tech is all about trying, get data, learn, iterate, get the market fit. And when I look at raising money as a project, it was the biggest failed project I ever did. I spent so much time on it. Most meetings led to nothing. In any other part of the business, you'll be like, okay, we need to optimize this. It's not working. We are wasting so much time.
Yeah.
And this is collectively, if you think about the amount of time collectively that all entrepreneurs and VCs waste, it's just horrendous and it's hard. So we could do better. I really think we could.
No, absolutely. Actually, one thing I actually, there was one another event I went to where I told people something that kind of freaked them out a little bit. Like, because for me, like VCs, investors in general, they always spend a lot of time doing due diligence on you as the entrepreneur, and I'm like, yeah, but why aren't we doing due diligence on them? And I have to say, I'm not getting any credit. Like, I had a phenomenal mentor when I started way back in the day, when I was like still young and silly and crazy or whatever. And he was like proper grown up. Like, he was at the time, he was already probably in his late 60s, early 70s and stuff. Very successful entrepreneur, investor, but he was mentoring me to raise funds and stuff. And he was the one that told me, he's like, firstly, as an entrepreneur, once you decide to raise funds, it's a full-time job. Don't think they can do this as some kind of a side hustle, right? So if you have a co-founder, let the co-founder take over the company. Basically, your job is to go there and you have to spend all of your time preparing.
Pause. I've heard this a billion times. I know. I've lived this.
Absolutely.
It's crazy. We should be busy building our companies.
Yeah.
I don't think we should accept this as like,
well, that's the thing. Because what he was saying, and that was something that was kind of brewing in my head till this day, is that he said the reason you've got to do this because the system prioritizes shareholders, and I think that is probably the point here. Because he said to me, like, you've got to put all of your effort into it because the system. I mean, I'm not saying he agrees with it, but he was like, but because the system's like, because once you have an investor in your company, basically, it's all about them. That's one of the reasons I think I didn't enjoy having investors, even though I generally had good experience. But the idea, the idea for me that your customers don't come first, your employees don't come first, I don't come first as the founder, my co-founders don't come first, but the shareholders must always come first, or you're in absolute deep shit. And I'm like, no, that's not right.
I think it's a sick system.
It is. It's. I mean, but what I told people, because like, although maybe it's not a good advice, but this is what I did, and this is what this mentor told me, that you should always demand due diligence to be done on the investors. And I was surprised. And I mean, I don't know from your experience, but from my experience, some investors were like, they're like, "Excuse me, why are you asking me?" Like, because the first question I would ask, right? Where'd you get your money from? Right? I mean, how do I know that, you're not funneling cash from some weird drug cartel somewhere or from a Russian oligarch? Because I actually came across a couple of startups. Yeah. Like they had money. Like, well, one of them did it on purpose, which I thought was crazy. But I know I can't remember who it was exactly, but it was during an event. This guy was saying that they found out by accident that one of their VC funds came through a Russian oligarch, and they were absolutely devastated. And I'm like, well,
that too.
You've got to do your due diligence. The VC is not going to like it. And I'm telling you, some told me like, well, they didn't tell me to my face, but it was like, that reaction is like, how dare you? Right? I'm like, tough luck, mate. You want to do due diligence to me? I'm doing due diligence on you. Like, obviously the investors that invested were pretty cool about it. Like, yeah, that's absolutely fine. But I think it's the system. The system kind of designed that, you know what? Nothing else matters. It's all about the shareholders. I reckon that system needs to change.
Yeah, I think that's another way of saying everything is revolving around making some people richer. And that's problematic. So one pattern I recognized or seen is that a lot of successful entrepreneurs, they say like you, they're like, actually, no more VCs. I know a handful personally of really successful female entrepreneurs who have, they did the impossible. They raised all the money. They built really successful companies. They exit. Like, they did the whole thing. And they're just like, no more VCs. Thank you. And I think that is a huge talent drain, right? These are the best, I think, female entrepreneurs. They have all the experience. They are the ones that VC should really be like, don't you want to do this again?
Yeah.
And they're just like, no thanks. this must be a sign that something is not. So I think also it's a huge power imbalance, right? From the beginning, it's a power imbalance. It's a system that is optimized to extract, exploit. And I think essentially you as an entrepreneur come with your life energy, right? It's your life energy. You pour it in, and some people, they just like, they take, and because they're in power position, they can just squeeze, and they take more than what's fair. You know, the basic concept of investing is fine. They take a risk, they get something back, but it's off. And the further you go in this journey, the more off it becomes.
Yeah.
And that's why at the end of it, you're not like, no thanks, I don't want this again. It's a system that is sick enough that people who survive it, they don't want to, you know, their head become immune. They're like, boing.
Yeah.
I really don't understand why the VC community doesn't look at this pattern, which clearly they must have recognized, and be like, we're investing in all these startups. We know that many are going to fail. We don't really care. And the few that make it will make us rich. But systemically, it's a failure all along the way. Puzzles me.
I kind of called this out. I did an episode a couple of episodes ago where I was talking about why I believe we are moving towards AI and tech dystopia, not utopia. And I basically called that the Silicon Valley VCs because I honestly think that they don't care. I do believe they know, because you said, like, you know, like they must know this. I really believe they do know, but they just know that nobody can do anything about it. Because if there's no regulation that says, you know what, you've got to prioritize the entrepreneur, you've got to prioritize the customers or the employees. No, it's like you said, the system is designed to basically dance to their tunes. And now we're seeing in Silicon Valley, you know, obviously the big names, you know, we're talking about, you know, sort of the Sequoia capitals of this world, right? For example, I'm not calling them out exclusively, but them and, you know, Andreessen Horowitz and quite a few others that were reported that they wanted to go full MAGA, for example, right? And I don't want to get too political, but basically they you know, they're based in California. California is predominantly a liberal state. Most of the entrepreneurs there are liberal, right? Statistically, obviously, I don't know all of them. But a lot of the money from these VCs funded these companies. And I thought to myself, well, imagine now these companies found out that their VCs, really powerful entities, going MAGA, they don't want regulation. Even though I kind of called out their bullshit when they say, well, actually, no, we support Trump, but we don't support MAGA. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, it's the same thing, mate. You know, if you jump on that ship, you are on that ship, whether you like it or not. It doesn't make any sense, right? And it's the ship that basically is anti-women, it's anti-regulation, it's anti-ethics, it's anti pretty much everything that you and I would call decent, right? Mm-hmm. So imagine the startups that funded them, like that received their funds. What can they do? Nothing. They can't turn around and say to Sequoia, hey guys, you know what? Here's your money back. I don't want you anymore. No, you can't do that. They own shares in your business. That's the end of the matter. If you don't like it as the founder, you can quit your own company. And to me, this is why I feel like, you know, because if you look at the current AI hype, it's pretty much driven by the VCs and the investment community. I mean, there are some entrepreneurs that kind of, they kind of jumped on the bandwagon because they promote their startups or whatever. But all of that bullshit about AI can do all these magical things that in reality it can't really do. But then you're on the opposite side, AI will kill humanity. Weren't humanity supposed to die by now, according to, Elon Musk a couple of years ago, that AI sort of destroyed all of us by now? That kind of nonsense. And to me, I'm frustrated with that, as you know, because as you said as well, we've got the tech to literally make the world a better place. We've got the technology. It's all there. But when we have these guys running the show, what chances do we have? Which is the reason why I call for regulation. But would the regulations ever come? I have no idea.
Yeah, it's one of the conversations that we need to have in the tech community about regulation. It's become such a default. I hear it over and over where it's like, no, we don't like regulation, stifles innovation.
But what does that mean?
I have found myself really often be the only one who's like, actually, we need regulation. You know, we need to protect users and we need to make sure there is a layer of democracy as we build this technology and many other things. But I think I think there is also a growing amount of LPs who do care about other things that only profit. That gives me some hope. But I have another really sort of crazy idea, which is I wish somebody, if you don't mind me going like,
oh, go for it, please. That's the whole point of this conversation. It's open, honest, right? We dish it all out.
I was thinking about the idea of a brand for the world, something that would make us all feel like, yes, we care about this planet. And I was like, nobody has ever managed to build a brand for the world. And sometimes I see the astronauts, they're coming back from space and they all say the same. They're like, it's a miracle that this world exists. We are so fragile. We cannot waste our time talking about, economics while we're messing up planetary support systems. It's like, it's so clear. They have this like clearness of the planet. Planet is first priority. And I was like, how would you build a brand that would make people have this sort of the planet? The planet is amazing. We need to care about the planet first. And I was wondering, there's been like religions and like other things that I've kind of tried, but I really wonder, maybe we have come to a time where we are connected and kind of like marketing oriented enough that we could somehow have something that would feel like a world brand. And because there's so many things that we need to solve as a planet,
as
right?
A planet,
like
yeah.
all of the big things. And I do think that there are actually many, 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 many people working to push towards something that feels more holistic, sustainable, who wants the good, relation to other people, who can see that wealth distribution on this planet is a problem. We have the tech to do good. We also have the money to do good.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, what if we could mobilize and kind of unite all of this good energy on some sort of simple, like, let's go and build this planet. And let's not go towards this crabby dystopian, sad, male-dominated bullshit world. Because I actually think there's more people who want to go the other way. But how do we... And from that, I had this like, where are the visionary leaders in Europe? And where is Europe as a visionary force on the planet? Damn. Like we don't want to be America who only cares about money. Sorry, I have an American boyfriend. I love many things about America. Like issues.
No, but it's true. I mean, I've got American friends that say the same thing. Like they hate the fact that their country is just all driven by money. It's like, what about humanity?
Right. And in China, where it's like clearly not the way to go and not the way to use technology. And so Europe could be this alternative. But how do we, most people are not like you where they're global. They're like, oh, I'm Danish or I am from this little place. It's like this nationalism that is like, So what if we could just somehow feel truly connected to a planet and not a country? I think that would be so cool.
Oh, yeah. I mean, amen to that. I mean, I think many of us been kind of calling for this for like forever, but I think there has to be a political will, isn't there? I mean, like we have.
Yes.
Well, I suppose when you have politicians, and I say with a lot of love and respect, I know some great people who are lawyers, but when you have politicians that are predominantly lawyers, lawyers aren't necessarily the most visionary people in the world. It's like actually interesting. I would go as far as saying, and again, I don't want to be insulting anybody, but again, I'm speaking from experience. Like when you look at engineers, they're not the most visionary people in the world. They're geniuses at what they do. They're amazing at, building whatever it is that they're building. But being a visionary is to have that ability to get out of that comfort zone. And, because you mentioned earlier, for example, you say that why is it, that we see predominantly, children of migrants that are really successful in entrepreneurship at level? Because, as somebody that migrated, that lived in different countries around the world, basically because you're constantly out of that comfort zone, right? Like you always try to learn the new culture, learn the new language, figure out that new surrounding, and then how do you your brain kind of starts to kind of figuring things out. And actually, this actually reminded me of another guest that I had here, actually a good friend of mine, is an award-winning mathematician, Jeremy Leavesley, and he actually made a really interesting point that to him, intelligence isn't about how much you can learn, but how much can you adapt. So basically, if you're out of that comfort zone and you go into a completely different world, the intelligent person will know how to survive that world because they'll figure out a way around it, right? And I think that's so true. And I think and he used that analogy even for AI. He said if AI doesn't know that it's making a mistake, then it's not intelligent. So therefore, all of the AI that make hallucinations and all that stuff, they're not intelligent because obviously they don't know or they don't understand that they're making mistakes. And I thought that's actually really good points. And I'm just wondering, is it maybe, you know, that nationalism problem is because it's people that never left their comfort zone. And that's not an insult. It's just a fact. I mean, they've never left their comfort zone. I mean, I know I've met people in the UK that have never been to London. And I'm like, you realize it's just down the road, right? It's like an hour drive. Just take a car and go there or something. You know, so perhaps we need to get people out of their comfort zone somehow, and maybe.
Yeah. And, you know, in some really brutal way, that's what climate change is doing, right? It's forcing us to realize that something is urgent and something needs to change. And I think for the people who have felt climate change in their backyard, it's like, okay, oh, wow, it's now. And I think that's happening in Europe now. It's, I think, been happening for a few years, other places. So that might be a driver in some kind of tragic way. But I think that's why we need the artists, right? One of my big artist heroines is Anaïs Nin. She was an amazing thinker. I know that most people know her as writing this erotic story, which was like a paid gig she did surely, but really her real body of work is something completely different. I think she's kind of a mystic. She's really, really very unusual, and I think it's wise. And she says, we need the artists because they bring the future in. And I think what she means is that you have this notion of something that's possible, which is actually something truly new. It's not some sort of repetition of a past. It's like something emergent. And some people have that sensibility to bring something that is manifesting a new version of the future, not just a continuation for it, but something truly novel. And we need somehow to bring that quality definitely to politics, but really to tech as well. You know, we need to figure out how do we shift our minds so that we don't just have this sort of robotic continuation of we must make more money, we must make more money, while things are burning and crashing left and right.
Yeah.
Because I think it's kind of a entitled privilege to have these, like, I don't know, blinds on, and you're like, no, we are successful. We made our LPs more rich. And then, like, well, wait, you need to have a little more systemic view here and see that employees crashed and burns, you know, water supplies got fucked, like up and right, everything is a disaster. You don't have the privilege anymore on this planet to be like, no, we are successful. Success has to be something that involves a system. So I think that's, I don't know, it's like a demand. People who are forming the world, we have to demand from them that they care about systems.
Yeah. The interesting thing is capitalism. If you look at the definition, the original definition of capitalism by Adam Smith, so the guy that actually came up with the idea. I mean, the general argument at the time, because obviously it was a feudalist society, so you had the one, you know, kind of something what we had today, but a bit more extreme, where we had that 1% of, you know, lords and, you know, royal families owning everything, and the peasants basically worked under them. And the argument, Adam Smith's argument, the basic principle was that, well, if you want to build more wealth, everybody has to be wealthy. You have to have the ability for everybody to be able to generate wealth, for them to be able to compete, to build their own business, to own their own, you know, land at the time. And I was like, that's actually a very good point. So because people don't talk about capitalism, because I actually call out even people who are anti-capitalists, right? Would they say, well, you know, capitalism is bad? Well, actually, no, because without capitalism, we're all going to be poor. But actually, I think the interesting thing is that even if, let's say, there's enough money to eradicate poverty, for example, right? Now people say, oh, this is some kind of, you know, socialist thing or, you know, wealth redistribution. Actually, not really, because guess what? Let's say we use all the money that we have around the world to eradicate poverty. Guess what? The same people who are the richest people in the world, they will still be the richest people in the world. So they're not actually losing huge amounts. So it's that will. So funnily enough, I can't remember who actually coined this phrase, that right now we are living in digital feudalism. It's not capitalism anymore.
Yes. I think that's, yeah. I've been reading that book about capital feudalism.
Yes.
Where it would make the whole planet lift. You know, if everybody was out of poverty, all the energy that is not sucked into, you know, the disastrous effect of being poor, you know, people would consume more. They would, you know, it's not like it's not possible to imagine a world where more people are thriving without us messing up the environment. It's a mind shift. It's like, how do we build things where we care about more things? I think this care is like actually the most undervalued value on the planet. You know, it's never been celebrated to care.
Yeah, it's seen as weakness.
The
even
toxic masculinity problem, right? It's like it's a beautiful, like, strong thing to be able to care for somebody or something, and it's totally underappreciated, right? I felt this very tangibly on my own entrepreneurial journey. Like we care about our users. We care about data privacy. We care about building a product that doesn't propagate like gender normative stereotypes that are problematic. So all this care from our users, we would get a lot of love back. You know, we really would. From the VCs, wouldn't count shit. You know, I met it over and over again. It was just not a metric that moved the needle one single tiny bit. And I think it should. I think that needs to be part of how we value companies. That's why I'm a little tired of the unicorn term.
Oh God, I hate that.
Because like, usually the companies that have gotten that valuation is because they've also raised about $1 billion.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I mean, I have a lot of respect for people who get there. I know it's not easy. They have worked their lives away.
Yeah.
But can we celebrate something else than a stupid valuation? Please. I know, I'm preaching to the choir, but like so few people, I mean, I go to a lot of tech conferences. I really do. People just don't say it.
Yeah, I know. Actually, I stopped.
I'm with the weird grandma lady over in the corner.
I mean, that's why I stopped going. I mean, I only go when they invite me to speak or something like that. But I actually stopped going. I used to go a lot as well, and I was like, I just got frustrated. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Either I do something about it and sort of at least shout about it, and maybe somebody will listen. And people are listening, which is great. But yeah, you're right. Even today, right now, in the world of tech, it's like, you know, like I went to because we've got a relationship with Microsoft, so as part of their startup program, so we can, you know, so we get early access to all of their AI stuff and so on. So I went to one of the events, like a panel discussion last year, and that's inside Microsoft, right? And you know, everybody was talking about, you know, AI is about, you know, the ROI and, you know, the number of parameters in your language models, blah 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 blah. And then there's this guy stands up and says, well, actually, from our point of view, the number one value for AI is trust. Can you trust that AI? And I can tell you right now, nobody trusts any of the AI models that are out there. And that's what people tell people, like as in the general, consumers, businesses, enterprises, no one trusts AI. I mean, it's like so much so that now when you see people say, oh, this must be AI generated, that's not a compliment.
No.
You know,
one of our VCs, they have as their investment, part of their investment thesis is the companies that will do well are the one that people trust.
Yeah.
So I think that's very true. Like that's the most rare asset to build as a company in a way. And I think it's very true. I think especially in health and probably in AI too, you know, you really have to trust that tech company. And I would love if there were ways to empower and enable users to navigate a little better who to trust, because honestly, it's impossible for a general audience to know what a company is doing with their data, for instance. You know, if they're in Europe and under GDPR, that's a good start. But how would you know they are? I mean, one of our biggest competitor, they always made it look like they were based somewhere where in fact they were based somewhere else, and so that's, trust. And the good thing about trust, because often people ask me, how do you build trust? And I'm like, you do the right thing every single day for years. I am so happy that it takes time to build trust.
Yeah.
It should be hard.
Because you have to prove it. Like, you have to show that you're going the extra mile to achieve it. So out of it, because obviously I know, going back to Clue, because obviously I'm very excited about Clue as well, because obviously, you've demonstrated your ethics personally, right? And I do know that, your ethics, your beliefs, is kind of proliferated throughout your teams, but the product as well. So effectively, it is a ethical product. And I'm just interested to know how your VCs reacted to that, because I had conversations before I set up Nebulae, and we already made a decision that we're not interested in VCs. But like when you set up anything, you always want to knock on a few doors just to kind of get an idea, just to make sure, right? And I cannot tell you how many times VCs told me straight away, Tim, the ethics thing is a good thing, but it's all bullshit. I'm like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, because, for us, we want an exit, like typical VCs that want 3 to 5 year exit plan, yada, yada. But if you try to focus on ethics too much, it takes time. It's more expensive, which is true. But yeah, no, we're not interested in that. It's too much. And I'm like, So as you said, they're not prioritizing that. For them, again, it's how quickly can they exit, quickly make money, etc. So how did you convince your VCs that, you guys should invest in Clue? We're focused on ethics. It may take time, but it doesn't matter. I mean, how well, actually, I don't know what was your pitch like, but what was the message that
we've tried everything? No,
we've tried.
I think it took VCs who already cared about some of the things that we cared about. I don't think you can convince the kind of VC that you mentioned. But the need to make money has definitely become bigger over time as investors, I don't know, maybe we also got later stage investors who cared more about numbers than the early stage ones. But I think Clue is still, really doing the right thing. And I'm very proud of the CEOs that came after me and the product people. But we definitely had to make choices that were more commercially that we would have made had we not had investors. And that hurt my heart many times. And at some point, it actually hurt my heart a little bit too much. And I was, I retired from the board. I did walk away from my own company at some point. And it's not because I don't think Clue is doing, really good work. I really think they actually are very, very ethical still. But for me personally, I'm always curious about the innovation part and sort of, and I think at this stage, the Clue is that it's healthy and the right thing to be quite commercially oriented, because otherwise there won't be a Clue, right? We have to.
You got to pay the bills.
You have to pay the bills. I think that's a good thing. It just wasn't so much my thing. I'm grateful it's somebody else's thing.
So you're not. So did you walk away completely? I mean, when did that happen? Like, when did you feel that?
I stepped off the board earlier this year. It's always very complex, these decisions, but it felt great to me.
Liberating, right?
And I still care deeply about the company. I still have a lot of contact, and maybe I'll be back on the board one day. But it was good to take a break, and also to have the freedom to look at this system and the systemic issues and call them out and be like, I don't like this. And that includes, criticizing a system that I am very grateful for, my current investors. I'm very grateful for their support. I think they have been very patient investors and very supportive. And yes, they also took full advantage a couple of times. It's been a long relationship. A lot of things have happened, but all in all, I'm grateful for their for them as people,
Yeah.
I still think it's a very broken system.
Yeah.
And it gave me the freedom to maybe be more vocal about that, not being on the board.
But see, but that's the issue
I
as
hope
well.
I'm not messing it up too much for Clue. That would not be great.
But that's what I was about to say. I mean, you wouldn't have had the ability to say what you just said to me while you were still on the board, right?
No, I don't know. I mean, I maybe would have, but might have been problematic.
Yeah.
It might still be problematic. But I've only met good people. You know, I know there are bad people out there, but I've met very good people, and it's never the person that is the problem. It's the system.
It's the system.
I hope they will hear that if they feel criticized.
Do you think the system will ever change?
Yes.
In our lifetime?
I think it will change when enough entrepreneurs keep their VCs accountable for being ethical. And it's difficult. I mean, I've learned, for instance, this is a very practical example, but I saw an overview of some of the biggest banks and how they invest into fossil fuels, especially in Africa. And because Silicon Bank folded and we ended up at a different bank, I was like, we have a problem because this bank is like, well, and I got the message like, yeah, true. And we need to do other things that are more important and urgent and like critical for the company right now. So, you know, we didn't change bank. I get it. I get it. And you have to be also very pragmatic building a company. But I think, you know, keep saying it. Keep, you know, even if it can't be done, keep being like, I'm uncomfortable with us having this crap bank. Sorry, I'm probably also messing up the relationship.
Go for it.
Probably it's different people dealing with Clue than the people making their investment decisions in Africa. So it's complex. I think that's maybe my biggest thing. We have to we cannot make things black and white. We have to be comfortable with talking about all the complexities, because that's where we find the solutions and the bridges, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like actually what Cindy Gallup was saying in our last discussion with her, that you have to be brutally open and honest about the problem, no matter how uncomfortable it is, how embarrassing it might be. But at the end of the day, you know, if you want to understand the problem, you need to dissect it. You've got to absolutely be open about it. And I think you're right. I think people have this fear of facing reality, I think. I mean, even now, like, for example, in the UK, I mean, I rant a lot about Brexit because it was such a stupid thing, but it's heartbreaking. I personally know families that broke apart because of it, which is like, to me, it's like, this is just so stupid. It's unbelievable. However, even now, we've got all the evidence that it's not working, that it's a disaster, whatever. Yet you see people that be like, no, but it was still the right decision. I mean, why do you say it's the right decision? Well, because you know we were pragmatic. I'm like, yeah, but like everybody warned you that it's a bad idea, that it's dangerous, it's divisive. I mean, like, you see people like that, they just don't want to accept the reality. And I think, you know, this is the thing that like, just before we recorded, I mentioned how, like, you know, I was involved in fighting misinformation, and it's like I was so shocked how many people don't care about the facts, which means heartbreaking, because I'm thinking, guys, because these facts are there to serve you. They're not against you, right? There's like, and I think it's kind of like saying, if God forbid somebody has cancer and they go to the doctor and the doctor says, yeah, sorry, sir or mom, you've got cancer. And like, oh, you're against me. You don't like me. It's like, no, I'm just telling you the fact to save your life. And I think this is the kind of thing that people probably need to understand, that the reality, yes, it might be ugly sometimes. It's uncomfortable. But if you deal with that reality, actually, your life will be a lot better.
Yeah.
So
that's almost like a spiritual note to, you know, you see what's actually there. That's how you meet the world, but it can be quite challenging.
Yeah. So what's like as a final thing, because you know time is flying too quickly for us. But what's the future then for you? What's your next journey?
I would love to find some very clever people to help articulate what the link is between female health, economy, and planetary well-being. Because I'm pretty sure there is a strong connection, but I don't think people have articulated the argument so well, or at least I haven't come across it. And I think that would be helpful. I have written a book about Clue Story and about many things we've discussed here. And I would love it to come out in the US, because I hope that many people in the tech community and beyond would want to read it. But it has proven very difficult to find a publisher so far. People say that I don't have enough followers on TikTok and Instagram, which is true because I have like 500 each.
The attention economy, huh? Yeah.
Or that I don't have enough name recognition, which is probably also very true. But, I think it definitely has made me think about how do you actually get your ideas out? Is book the right format? And I came across this list of the 43 books that have formed the thinking Silicon Valley. And they were all written by white men, pretty much.
Wow.
And it just made me like, no, like the world need to hear my perspective, because it's not because it's mine, but because if I'm a category, like that category is missing.
Yeah.
So that gave me some energy to like, okay, how do I share my ideas if it can't be a book published by a big publishing house in America? What else am I going to do? And that's what I'm sort of working with right now. I don't really know the answer, but
start a podcast.
Yeah,
that was my approach. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, but so far I'm happy to be on yours too.
No, thank you. No, I appreciate it. No, because I 100% agree with you that there need to be a lot more conversations. I think, within the tech community, but also beyond the tech community, because the world of tech has impacted our lives, everybody's lives in every single element. You name it, but healthcare, finance, identity, right, education, the environment. It's all part of it. I think long gone are the days of tech was just for the us geeks, right? It's everywhere. So it's important that we have that open conversation, and I think that's well, at least that's my aim with this podcast, that that we have that conversation. It's not just me, like you said, just that lonely category just ranting on his own somewhere. Right? It's to actually, firstly, is to show that I'm not the only one, that there are many other people way better than me, way smarter than I am, that also believe in the same thing, and there's a reason for that. And but hopefully then collectively we make that voice, and then hopefully the general public starts listening properly. That's the idea. But again, just as an end, I just want to thank you so much for being part of this conversation. I think it's it's really inspiring, and I think definitely as somebody who actually a father of a daughter, I mean, I want the world to be more equal towards women as well. So that's something that I think that it's a long fight, and I just want to say thank you for being one of the leading figures in this fight. The world needs you, so thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much. And well, the world needs all of us, really. Then I'm sure you will bring up a wonderful daughter to continue the fight.
No, thank you so much. Thank you. But we'll have more conversations. That's for sure.
We will. I hope I'll meet you at a conference in some corner. We can be like the weirdos together down in the corner.
No, absolutely. No, any time. Actually, one of the things I would love to do is like, well, my aim is that I want to make more face-to-face conversations like this. Like right now, this is more like an MVP, right? So it's to get build the connections. But no, 100%. Yeah, whenever you're in London, or if I'm whenever I'm in Germany, we'll have to hook up and have a chat.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, I'll be following your podcast and see what other voices you find.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm following you already on LinkedIn, and again, for all the listeners, viewers, all the links for Ida's book, all the work, your website, LinkedIn, etc. Everything is in the description. So, make sure you follow Ida. You need to.
I should warn that my website is really only like a catch to be pinged when my book is out, if it ever comes out. So there's nothing on my website, but it is probably the place to follow me.
But thank you so much, Ida. I really appreciate your time. Well, my friends, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Ida Tin. I told you she's amazing, right? And I think she's going to do something. I don't think she's just going to quit, right? Right? Surely not. We shall see. I'll keep you guys updated. I'm sure she'll be very happy to come back and give us an update with her journey. But one of the points that she made, I think, is really important, and I kind of talked about it in more detail in my previous episode, which you can see over here or in the link in the description below. And I'm not going to repeat all the points that I made, but definitely the concern I have is that I think entrepreneurship is in danger as we know it, because the good old days, I like to say this these days, being like an old fart, but the good old days of new graduates, freshers out of universities or dropouts, coming up with a new idea, go to their parents' or grandparents' garage and build something, and boom, you've got the next Apple or the next Google or whatever. I honestly don't think this can happen now. And I did mention in my previous episode where the picture that we see today was starting to kind of materialize around 2014. Because as I mentioned in my last episode, 2012 was the period where basically the who of AI and the tech sector really kind of started to come together. We all part of that same cohort. And that was the point where, companies like Google started to buy companies out, especially in AI, like they're done with DeepMind. We started to see that M&A activity was pretty active already. Probably not as aggressive as it is today, but it was definitely getting there. And I really can't see how anybody can build the next Google when you have VCs basically investing in your company and they want an exit. And that exit basically comes in the form of you selling your company to the big tech. That wasn't really that easy 10 or 15 years ago, right? And that's a problem, because how are we ever going to see a new Google? Now, somebody, I mentioned this, I remember, I think one of the videos in the past where somebody kind of challenged me and said, well, Tim, OpenAI is a new company. Of course it's not new. What are you talking about? OpenAI is 10 years old. In fact, OpenAI emerged as a non-for-profit to basically fight off Google, because that was the period when Google was basically on a spending spree, buying out AI startups, right? So, and Sam Altman, he is young though. He's a talented individual, highly talented. But the guy ran Y Combinator, which is the largest tech accelerator in the world, for 10 years or something like that. So he was really active in the world of tech for years before OpenAI became a thing. So as I keep on saying to you guys, my generation and slightly younger generation, that cohort of entrepreneurs, we basically build the tech sector that you see today. And what I'm very sad to see that I just don't see how the new generation of entrepreneurs can do what we did 10 or 15 years ago. I just can't see it happen. And just to give you another picture, when I started 20 years ago. So that's before the Google campus journey. But when I started, basically, there were a lot of funding options available. Yes, we didn't have the lovely accelerators and shared office space and all that lovely stuff that we see today. But that didn't really matter, even though, it was a bit more expensive to have an office at the time. But for me, accessing funds was pretty easy, actually. Yeah. Of course, I still had to pitch. I still had to do a lot of work. But just to give you an idea, I had access to plenty of grants, bank finance, local. At the time, I was based in the Midlands area in the UK. So there were like local funds funded by the European Union before Brexit, obviously. Loads of funds available that support local tech talents and stuff like that to build businesses, etc. So basically, I had enough money to fund my company for over 5 years before I went anywhere near investors. Imagine that. Today, that's not the case. There are hardly any grants. Europe, it's different. I'm speaking from the point of the UK. There are grants, but they're very hit and miss. It's not as easy as it used to be. I'm telling you that right now. Europe, again, it's highly competitive. Again, it's not as accessible. I suppose maybe somebody of my generation has a much higher chances of securing some of these grants than a noob from university, purely because I know how to pitch and I know they look for people with a track record and all of that stuff, right? Like VCs do as well. So, the money is not there. It's all investors right now, all investors. So the system, to me, as far as I'm concerned, is not entrepreneur friendly. They say that they are, but we've seen what happened during the pandemic. Who suffered the most? Smaller businesses. How many small businesses shut down because of the pandemic? And what support did they get? Nothing. That's not good. That's not small business friendly, is it? What about in the UK, at least with Brexit? Smaller businesses suffered the most. And the then Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, was told that the business community were basically shouting and screaming, saying that, look, whatever that Brexit crap is killing us and it's not really going to help the economy at all. His response, and I quote, was fuck business. That's not small business friendly, is it? So I really don't know what the solution is. I honestly don't know. Like I said, I'm not going to delve into that because I already talked about that in the previous episode. But you can see the frustration that I have. You can see the frustration that Ida has. So even before that, I obviously spoke to Cindy Gallup. I spoke to Henry Nash. And the message is the same. It was a lot easier for us back in the day to set up the companies that were set up and succeed and build something with that compared to today. Today, you're pretty much at the mercy of the investors. Now, I know I'm building a company, for example, Nebulae, with 0 investors, but again, I'm in a very different position. I'm in a privileged position where I can do that. But again, I can't spend the sort of money that VCs would fund some of our competitors, for example, right? And as I said, I know that there's not much support because, like I said, I'm running a self-financed company and I'm just on the lookout and say, okay, now what other alternative funding opportunities that are out there? None. Tiny. We're talking about peanuts, which is like nothing, right? I mean, I can get maybe raise $10,000. I mean, what the hell am I going to do with $10,000? What could any tech startup do with $10,000? It's not good. It's not good. So what's the solution? Like I said, I don't know. I think the only solution is that we have to continue having this conversation. More of us need to speak out. I suggest that you speak to your local government, whatever country that you're based. I mean, I'm making a lot of effort connecting with the new government here in the UK. As I mentioned again in my previous episode, that the Secretary of State for Science, Technology and Innovation actually responded to my email, basically highlighting that, yeah, they want to do things differently from the previous government, but they're still kind of figuring it out. And I appreciate that. But at the same time, at the time of the recording of this video, I've been hearing that they were trying to lift up some of the copyright protection laws to support AI businesses, which is insane. But like I said, so we've got a lot of work to do here, guys, a lot of work. And so, comment below. If you're running a company that's self-financed and you manage to figure out different ways to fund your company through whatever funding sources that you know about, yeah, share with everybody and tell us which country you live in. It's interesting to know how different countries are dealing with this. But absolutely, I think, I'm sorry to be cynical, but I really can't see how any young entrepreneur today will be able to build the next big thing. I doubt it, because right now it's a game of building something small, selling it off, make money, move on, and build something else that is also small. I mean, again, nothing wrong with that, by the way. That's actually a very, very nice way of making money for yourself as an entrepreneur. But if you actually want to build something big, right? Like people of my generation and older generation wanted to do, they wanted to build something big. They had that ambition of, quote unquote, making the world a better place. I just can't see how that's possible. I really can't see that's how it's possible. Again, tell me, guys, what you think. I really appreciate your comment. I really appreciate your feedback as well. And more importantly, I really appreciate Ida Tin's time. Thank you so much, Ida, for coming. As always, guys, you know what to do. Help us grow this channel. Share, subscribe, like, in whatever order, but make sure you subscribe. That's the most important thing. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. And also to support us, make sure you check out all the sponsors below. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Peace.